7 o'clock, so we'll get started. So welcome to Food Truck Training Book Club discussion. We are working on Food Truck 201, Get Off the Truck. I am your host, Lauren Bell. I am the co-owner of Double Trouble Philly Cheesesteaks, and I own that business with my twin sister, Lori, and her husband, Keith. So welcome. And joining us tonight and every Monday night is Mr. Bill Moore. He is the founder and creator of the Food Truck Training Group on Facebook, which today has over 31,000 members. I'm not sure the exact number, but I'm working on it. Bill and his wife, Melissa, brings more than 45 years experience to this industry. They have run large restaurant chains such as Wendy's and Burger King. They've managed food trucks and hot dog carts, etc. Bill is the author also of such books titled Food Truck 101, From Beginner to Winner, Putting the Cart Before the Dog and Taking It to the Streets. Yes. Bill and Melissa spend countless hours maintaining the professionalism and the integrity of this group. So please, with no further ado, help me welcome to the platform none other than the man with the plan, Mr. Bill Moore.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Yeah, we should have little New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, the whistle. They'll be out soon.
There you go. That'll work. That'll work. Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here and see folks that are interested in learning about how to get off the truck. So let's start with a question, Lauren.
Well, all right.
I know you've got some employees.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any employees? Because we're going to be talking about two important things today, food cost and labor cost.
Yes.
So share.
I just use my son.
Your son, that counts?
That counts.
And I pay him, I feel like I pay him a wage. I mean, I don't know if he deserves it all the time, but I pay him $10 an hour plus tips.
Okay.
So he does a good job, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. He's 15, he's young, he's learning, it's his first job, so, and to tell you the truth, I'm a little too nice and a little too easy on him, because he is such a good kid in general, but I need to be more, firm. And I used to be a food manager, so I should have that same rule for him, but I don't, so.
Yeah, it's tough when you have your children there for sure, or friends even. So
yeah,
Lauren,
it is.
You have friends and family working for you, right?
Yeah, and that could be a double whammy. So we got two guys. Our two guys are from church. One is a musician, the other one's a singer, and so they come and they're good. But when you have relationships with these people before they're employees, sometimes you have to backtrack to set your boundaries, and sometimes that's not always easy to do. So when you start off as friends and our family, it's like you're saying what to do, and like the response I get from my kids is, "Mom, I know that. I know what I'm doing." And I'm like, "But this is the way I want it done." Well, look, if you want me here, this is what And so it's just always this battle when it's like that. But then, strangers and people you don't know is not always accessible or trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to take the good with the bad and just make, life deal you lemons, make lemonade.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody brings up a good point about when you have a relationship with someone that also ends up being an employee, whether it be a child, a spouse, a sister, or friends even, you have to set those boundaries of how you're going to act when you're in that professional environment. And it's tough. It really is. I think back to when I was a very young manager and I was hiring my friends. And that's super tough when you're 19 and 20 years old and hiring your friends to come work for you, and then you got to be their boss. And that doesn't always work out well.
No.
Yeah, it is a challenge.
Sometimes me and Lori will step off the truck and say, "Look, we're really talking to them, but I'm going to act like I'm talking to you and just kind of go with the flow." And so she'll come in sometime and she'll go, "Hey, look, Lauren, we really got to do this. I really need this done. So sometimes it feels like to everybody in the room that she's talking to me, but she's really addressing all of us, and they can hear the instruction of what it is she's saying. And then we kind of agree, oh, okay, I got it. No, we got to do it right now, you know. And so sometimes it's easier to do it like that, but it's a lot of backpedaling when they're friends and family.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you got to be able to set the kind of example that you want so the business runs the way you want it to. And that's tough. There's no two ways of saying it. It is tough. So let's go ahead and jump into the two biggest expenses a food truck is going to have. Number one is food cost. And we talk food costs all the time on the group, and sometimes I will talk about it incessantly, it seems like. Because not only is this either your number one or your number two most biggest expense, it's also the one that can get away from you quickly without you realizing it. So I'm going to give you some tips that we don't normally talk about on how to control your food costs. The very first one up there is have a 100% ring up policy. Now, what that means is when it's slow in the afternoon or even before you get open, you think, I want to go ahead and grab whatever your food product is, and I'm going to eat one. There's not a problem with that, but you need to ring it up. It needs to show through your system so you can control it on your inventory. So you 100% ring up every food item. If you're giving away something because somebody complained, ring it up and then free it off. If you're giving away samples, ring it up and then free it off so you can account for the food. When you get into a good habit like that, and if you're using a POS system, you can set up keys that would reflect what's being rung up if it's free, like an employee meal key or a sample key or a refire or a mistake key. You can ring all those up and then be able to track them so you can look at the end of the month and go, okay, I gave away 15 samples, we had 13 employee meals, and I had 5 refires. And then if the refire number, the mistake number gets too high, then you've got that tracking method to go, hey, dudes, we got to get serious about not making mistakes. But if you just correct the mistake and give the guests their food without tracking it, at the end of the month, you're trying to figure out, how many did I give away? How come I'm missing, a certain amount of dollars or a certain amount of buns or a certain amount of hot dogs or Philly cheesesteaks? So you have a 100% ring up policy. If it doesn't get rung up, the only other acceptable place for the food to end up would be in a waste bucket where you're counting it. So you know how much you actually dropped on the floor, what you had to throw away. And that's what that second little tip there is, have a waste tracking system. What we used to do is we would have a different colored trash can. Usually it was just a small clear bucket, when we would use clear trash bags so you can actually see through it. And anything that we messed up on, we put mayonnaise on a sandwich, it was not supposed to have mayonnaise. We dropped a piece of meat on the floor. We dropped a piece of cheese on the floor. We picked it up, put it in that bucket. At the end of the day or the end of the shift, we're going through and counting that, all of the food. And then that gets recorded on our inventory system. So at the end of the month, again, we're able to look at that and go, okay, I'm missing 15 pieces of cheese, but they're all recorded on my waste sheet. So I'm technically not missing them. And then you feel good about that. Even though you did waste it, at least you know that no one stole anything, that no one ate something without being recorded. So with a waste tracking system, a food truck should probably also do a daily inventory. And the reason I say that a food truck should is because in my restaurants, whenever we had a food cost problem, that would be the one way I could slap the hands of the managers, make them count the inventory every day. And if that didn't fix the problem, we're counting it every shift. Now, if you can think of, a fast food restaurant is going to have upwards of 100 to 150 products on inventory. Nobody wants to count that every single day. So it becomes that pain point of, if you don't get your food costs under control, you're counting inventory. You may have to count it by shift. But a food truck, on the other hand, should be able to count their full inventory every day because you just don't have that many items. And what that does is it keeps you very aware of how much food you're going through. So you can order better, for one, but then also you'll notice those anomalies where you go through a whole bunch of Philly cheesesteaks one day and you realize, man, we sold a whole bunch more than we normally do. And you can back that up by the bun count and then sales. But if you go through a whole bunch of Philly cheesesteaks and the sales don't back it up and the bun count doesn't back it up, then you know you got a problem somewhere. Why did we use more than we normally do? So that's why you take a daily inventory to help keep you aware of where your food's going. You got to have a budget. We talked about that a little bit in the previous chapters too. A budget, all that is you thinking about how I'm going to be spending money that will be coming in soon. If you're going to do $1,000 today in sales and you want to run that 25% food cost, you need to have $250 worth of food on the truck. If you don't have $250 worth of food on the truck, you need to go out and buy enough food to get you to the 250. Otherwise, you can't do $1,000 in sales because you don't have enough food. But a budget is just making you think about pre-spending your money. Prep checklist. That one becomes probably one of the tools that most food truck owners don't use. A prep checklist is not only I need to slice lettuce and tomatoes and lettuce, and I need to, maybe pre-slice buns if you have bread that's not already sliced. But a prep checklist also says how many of those you should be doing based on the sales you project. So sticking with that $1,000 sales projection for today, if you normally go through 30 pounds of onions for every $1,000, that means $1,000 day, got to prep 30 pounds of onions. You don't wing it. You don't go, we'll do 5 pounds. We'll do 3 pounds because I'm being lazy. Oh, I didn't go to the store today. We'll just do what we got. Those things cause you to run out of food. Those things cause you to cheat on your portions because you don't want to run out. And if you're cheating on your portions, your guests know something's wrong. They know we're not getting the usual amount of whatever that product is you're skimping on. So a prep checklist to remind yourself what to do and then how much to do. Another checklist you need is time and temperature. Now this goes along with your HACCP plan. This helps you control your food costs and also gives you that chain of custody for all of your food. So if an issue does come up, you can tell the health department that, hey, I did all my times, I did all my temperatures. All of the food that I got is wholesome food. Now, if what came in from my distributor wasn't good, that's not on me because I'm showing you I handled it properly. If you do this business long enough, you will have somebody accuse you of making them sick. They're going to say, well, this food truck food poisoned me. And if that accusation gets to the health department, they have to come investigate. And the first thing they're going to want to see is, do you have any records of your times and your temperatures? Do you have whatever documentation your state requires for your commissary? They're looking for all those things basically to exonerate you. They want to know you aren't the reason this person got sick. So if the paperwork that you keep exonerates you, they move the next step back. They go to Walmart or they go to Sam's Club or they go to Cisco, wherever you got your food. And then they do the same thing with them. Are y'all holding all your food in the proper temperatures? Was it at the proper temperature? Let me see your paperwork showing that. And if the distributor can exonerate themselves, then they go the next step back to the producer. That's why when you see those big food recalls, it usually ends up being some grower somewhere did something that contaminated the food and it gets recalled. How all that happens is somebody has backtracked it to the root cause, because that's all they're going to try to do. And I've been through those, I think 5 or 6 times. And in every single case, I had enough internal records to show that I wasn't the problem, or my restaurant wasn't the problem, or the food truck wasn't the problem. Then the next little tip there for food cost is the line setup checklist. Yes, I know your food truck's real tiny and you know exactly what needs to go on the line every time you set up, but you got to have that checklist. So when you go to train somebody, they have something to go by. And then it's also make sure that you set things up exactly the same way every single day. Now, a line checklist also includes not only the size of the pan and the depth of the pan, because those have an impact on your food cost, but it also the portion. What's the portion control going to be? Am I using a spoon? Am I using tongs? Am I using a ladle? Am I using a spatula? So all of those things need to be set up on a checklist so that you can just very quickly, or an employee can very quickly go, yep, we got all these things. We are ready to go. Because you see so many folks want a checklist for, yeah, I'm going to be doing a big event. Give me a checklist. You need a checklist just to set up. You don't need one for a big event. Because if you have the checklist to set your line up, guess what you also have? A checklist to do an event. And then the last thing there on the list is portion control. Every bit of food needs to have some type of portion control. If it's a food that you can measure with a measuring cup or a tablespoon or some type of spoon or measure that has a marking on it, use it. If it's something you do by weight, like French fries, for instance, have a scale, set up the proper weight for your French fries, and then leave that as a display for the following French fries that are scooped all day long to match that visual display. Because what you're going to find if you sit down at your kitchen table and have written recipes and you've told yourself, yep, we're going to put 6 ounces of French fries per container, and you never ever double check yourself, I promise you, you are overweighing. If you randomly pull one and say, let's just weigh it, you're going to be over. And I know that from experience. I've told the story before. The first place I worked for, we had a scale that we had to weigh every single portion of roast beef before we put it into a sandwich. So literally I was weighing out 2.8 ounces of roast beef for hundreds of sandwiches a night. You get good at knowing what 2.8 ounces is. But if you don't use the scale and use it consistently, you eventually get heavier. You go heavier, and it's not on purpose. It just happens. And we saw that many, many times when we'd have an employee say, yeah, I can do this. And you just double check them. And yep, they ended up going 2.9 and 3.0 consistently. And all that does add up. So those are some tips on food cost. Typically, food costs, again, is either the number one or the number two most expensive costs you're going to have in your food business. So now we'll go to the other one. This will either be number one or number two, depending upon where food is in your business. So here's a few things to help you control your labor cost. And a couple of these probably going to be a shock to you. First, you got to understand you have two kinds of labor. One is indirect and one is direct. Indirect is labor that you spend that has nothing to do with taking care of your guests. So this would be prep work labor, because you're not cutting up onions while you're waiting on somebody. You're cutting up onions or tomatoes or whatever in the morning before you ever open for business. That's indirect labor. Somebody taking the trash out, indirect labor. Somebody cleaning the trailer out the end of the night, indirect labor. You're not waiting on a guest. So then by implication, that means direct labor is waiting on a guest. That's the labor you use when you're open for sales. So knowing that there's two different kinds of labor helps you to control what you need or don't need. You control your labor by having a sales forecast and then scheduling based on that sales forecast. So if you guys recall, we've got these two little diagrams down here that represent the number of employees per guest count. So we have 2 employees, then we have 6 employees. So if your food truck generally lands in this 10 to 25 guests an hour, 2 people typically can handle it unless you have a really complex menu. And then that means that if your sales forecast is going to be 10 to 15 people an hour, then you know you only need 2 employees. This is the hardest thing you're going to do as an owner, as a manager, as anybody that's in charge of employees. You get accustomed to what you're accustomed to. So for example, on Double Trouble, the first few days I went to visit them, they had 2 employees, one of them being Lauren, and then the other being Shelley. But they didn't need 2 employees because it wasn't that busy. They didn't open up to, 10 to 25 people an hour. So that additional employee should have came on later in the day when it did get busy. And yes, there's going to be times when you get caught and you're busier than you can handle before the employee comes on. That happens. If it happens once, that's just an occurrence. That's an accident. That happens. If it happens twice, that's a coincidence. Okay, it happened. If it happens a third time, now you have a pattern. Once you have a pattern, you can schedule to a pattern. Because if it happens 3 times, it's going to happen a 4th and a 5th and a 6th time. But you can't get used to having whatever your employee count is, whether it's 2 or 5 or 3, doesn't matter. Once you get accustomed to it, you think that's what I need. Oh, we can't run with anything less than that. I see that all the time when I go to open a new restaurant. Because when you go to open a new restaurant, you put an employee in every single spot you can stick one because they don't have the productivity they need. So you'll have one so look at this one that has 6 people down here. So you have an employee at all of those different positions. And you're only doing 10 guests an hour because they don't know what they're doing yet. But at the point that they start to get good and you realize, well, I got to control labor now, you're accustomed to 6 people doing the work. And so when you go to cut back, they all feel like, oh my God, you're making us work so hard. Because you now have one less person. So the productivity of the other 5 has to go up. But if it's not a profitable productivity, so 2 people, 10 to 25 guests an hour, could be 10 to 15. Again, depends on how complex your menu is. Could be that only one person can handle 5 guests an hour before it gets to be too cumbersome. Work out what your numbers are and then schedule to those numbers. And then should be based on a sales forecast. How many people are you going to be waiting on tomorrow? Positioning charts, and that's essentially what this is, telling employee number 1 and employee number 2 where they're going to be, and each additional employee where they're going to be, and it should be based on sales projections. So in this chart here, this shows where the employees should be working and what positions they should be doing when there's only 2 of them. And if you recall in that presentation, we had 3 and 4 and 5. When you assign the position chart, they should also know what they're doing, obviously in that position, but they should have task lists, restocking list. They should have everything to keep them busy, to keep them productive when you don't have a guest or food to serve. So position charts, super important thing to have. And then the one thing that we tend to fail in food trucks is cross-training. Whoever the owner is plops themselves down wherever they feel the most comfortable because they're the owner, they're in charge, they'll go wherever they want to go. And then they build the staff around them without cross-training the staff to do their job because, hey, I'm the owner, I'm going to be here every time we're open. So you can't do my job. What that does is it locks you into that job for the remainder of the time you're in business. And you don't want that. So cross-train everybody. And I know we talked about this on another video, another book club, and we'll continue to talk about it. Everybody on the food truck has to know how to do everything. Because in a situation like this, let's say that the trash here is super filled up and you send this employee, hey, run the trash out to the dumpster. So they grab the trash, they run out. But if this employee here, and hopefully that's you as the owner, doesn't know how to run the cash register, now you got to say, I'm sorry, my cashiers run out to the dumpster. They'll be right back. Doesn't work that way. Because whoever's waiting on the order is just going, no, I think I'll go somewhere else. Because this is about guest service. It's not about making them wait on something we're doing. And it's the same with this group here. If you pull this guy out, all these other people need to know how to do the fryer. If they don't, this guy's too important. And he actually has a chokehold on your business because if he realizes how important he is, nobody else knows how to cook the fries. then he can go as slow or as fast as he wants, and he controls your business rather than you as the owner controlling the business. So cross train, and then hope that they get better than you. One of the things I always prided myself on was I had mentioned I was a crew person for a long time, and I got to weigh all those sandwiches. Yeah, I got really, really good at that, and I got really, really fast at making sandwiches because they embarrassed the crap out of me at an employee evaluation. So I took it upon myself to get really, really good. As I got into management, what I looked for was somebody that would be better than I was. And every once in a while I would find that. I would find an employee that was so crazy fast, but still neat and could make the sandwich look the way it's supposed to look, that I would just sit and really be in awe of how fast they were. Because I was fast and they were faster than me. And that was always my pride point. Can I find somebody faster than me? Because guess what that means? I don't have to be back in the kitchen. I can actually step out of the food truck and not worry because they're better than I am. That's what you want. You want the people to be better than you are. Because if they are, your job just infinitely got easier. You don't get paid for by the hour. You get paid for the value you bring to the hour.